Friday the 13th, and this upload is from TRALEE as usual. And basically, the share I'm uploading is about advocacy and supports and services for victims of rape, revenge porn, injustice, and basically discrimination and everything that I've discussed in these shares. So basically, as I've mentioned, there's been the incident of over 10 years ago, but as I've said, that's been helped with regard to how recovery and fellowship had an input. This incident is a little bit different because there's not just human rights and women's rights issues involved. There's also the issue of children's rights, and that's particularly serious. But anyway, with all that's happening, and as I've shared earlier, there's been the medical incompetence, the bodily integrity violations, etc. I'm here living alone in an apartment of about 3 apartments altogether, and basically the medical ailments that have been caused for me, the injuries that I've suffered, I'm pretty much treating them by myself. But with regards to the agencies and ombudsmen that I've contacted with regards to the medical ill practice or medical um, malpractice, um, there's been a lot of, you know, serious issues raised with regards to my health that were unnecessary. When I gave birth in 2015, I had full health, and even though I'd worked quite hard while I was pregnant as well, on my marital property, I was obviously affected by the work, and skeletal injuries and whatnot have occurred and whatnot. So these are all untreated ailments that I'm treating myself without the practitioner's treatment that would be required. So that's just one particular issue that's as a consequence of what's happened since 2015. As well as that, the issues with regards to just and fair trial and legal violations that I've experienced as well. And I've mentioned about the falsification of documents and the falsification of information um, regarding identity theft and financial theft that I've also experienced. So this is ongoing, and to be experiencing unjust and unfair trial in 2020, a democracy, is all pretty serious for any person to be coping with without advocacy, supports or services. So basically, my point is with all these uploads that I'm sharing from a different perspective with regards to the factors that are involved and how people are affected when there's hate crime and human rights violations and constitutional violations, the issue that I find quite worrying with agencies like He for She and the Me Too movement, etc., 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 all great causes, but in modern day Ireland, with different agencies to help with these kind of vendettas, to be experiencing what I'm experiencing and to have the advocacy, supports and services that I'm entitled to, as well as my legal rights, my marital rights, my property rights, all to be completely, you know, just as if no rights at all. So that's very unusual, I find, as a grown adult, as a competent adult, as a qualified professional, as a law abiding citizen, as I keep reiterating. But you see, as I've mentioned also, this issue has also involved defamation, and I've touched on that topic already as well. So there's been very serious reputational damage done to my good name and my profession, and etc., etc., etc. So this is ongoing, and there have been the legal violations. The politicians are aware, the ombudsmen have been made aware, and there have been no advocacy or supports or services provided whatsoever. As I've mentioned, the bodily integrity violations and the medical incompetence have all been extremely serious. all as a consequence also of the spiritual violence that I experienced as a Royal Angelic Light Worker. So this is ongoing, and these uploads have been shared with the relevant UN agencies, with the relevant politicians, the relevant ombudsman, the relevant authorities, and yet for some reason um, there isn't any acknowledgement of the very serious offences that I've experienced. For this to be happening to any woman in 2020, especially with regard to financial theft, because health is wealth, as they say, and my hierarchy of needs have been intentionally disrespected, which is basically another human rights offence. So, this issue of people that have exploited my work, that have assaulted and exploited my light body, my gifts and expertise that I've contributed to society safely and positively and voluntarily on occasions as an educator is absolutely horrendous to be relaying online on uploads that haven't been acknowledged as of yet. So, this, as I've mentioned, is an issue of a vendetta, and for victims of such vendettas, I find it very serious, especially when there's like children's rights involved. I find it very serious that politicians ignore and ombudsmen ignore these kind of matters. Um, Advocacy, supports, and services are an entitlement also, and to have legal rights recognised are also an entitlement. So, this matter that I'm experiencing unjustifiably, and I can't emphasize that enough. This entire vendetta that has been completely irrational, unjustifiable, and simply due to hate crime and people disrespecting my rights as an Irish citizen, and people that have basically trespassed and that have perpetrated ancestral assault, also, I might add, is all a little bit too much for any government to be ignoring. Um, the women's groups, all the agencies, the NGOs that are aware of this matter, um, how would ye honestly cope in such a situation when there is also very serious disinformation and defamation occurring also? So, the information that I have been requesting, as I've mentioned in the earlier uploads, still hasn't been forthcoming. There's been changes in this community, in this country, that I have sought information about that has been intentionally withheld from me in this premeditated and collectively orchestrated vendetta of hate crime. And yet, I'm experiencing medical incompetence, financial theft, defamation, financial exploitation, bodily integrity violations, privacy violations, and the intrusion of individuals defaming mental health, my mental health, being defamed by these culprits that still haven't confronted what has occurred in the past and that are still avoiding what has occurred recently. So, as I've referred to this before, regarding mental health issues of individuals that are untreated, I find that more serious. But people defaming a person's competence and capabilities is, is quite insulting as a teacher to have that kind of thing relayed or even questioned. So, the other issue about financial incompetence, that is another tactic by these kind of individuals to, undermine a person's right to survive in society, which is an automatic birthright, is even more hideous, especially considering the amends and compensation that I have been due since over a decade ago, and even more so in recent times. So there's an obstruction of justice, and there's violations of privacy in my current accommodation, and it's all absolutely horrendous that this is occurring in 2020. So, with regards to advocacy, and supports and services that victims of hate crime are entitled to. Um, I'm wondering, how has such a service of, say, for instance, court appearances or even appointments with different state agencies, or like, say, tomorrow I have an appointment and I'm wondering, is that appointment safe for me to get to? Am I going to come from that appointment safe and intact without being harassed any further? Um, these are the things that I'm wondering about. Um, there are individuals that intrude and impose and that have caused very serious breaches of confidentiality and that have altered information and perpetrated identity theft. These are all big concerns for victims these days. And as for those imposters that intrude and trespass into other people's lives and cause untold damage, um, I hope the Taoiseach and the government are aware of what's happening in Tralee, County Kerry as a consequence of being married to a property owner. The supports that have been withheld from me is absolutely outrageous. The legal violations I've experienced are outrageous, and the exploitation and financial abuse I've experienced, and the medical incompetence, and the children's rights violations. I wonder, are the government ever going to take any notice of what's going on in Tralee, County Kerry, Ireland before it gets a little bit too serious? Because property theft is very, very serious, and marital rights to be disrespected in the midst of spiritual issues that I've already mentioned also. This is getting a little bit tiresome. For a person that's been experiencing medical incompetence, it's absolutely humiliating that a government of Ireland in 2020 would think this is just an issue of turning a blind eye to. So that's my upload for now, and I hope that all other victims are as secure and safe as the next person that isn't being victimized and violated and, experiencing what I'm discussing. So the authorities, I hope, are safeguarding victims in society to be able to live freely without their safety and rights being threatened. And for those that are disturbing the peace and threatening, endangering or